Garrett, let's start in the Big 12. We were just there with Arizona State, Kansas State. We're going to do a quick standings update in these conferences. So as we pull up the Big 12 standings here, BYU obviously is undefeated at 6-0. Colorado at 5-1. Those are the two teams that control their own destinies. If they win out, they will face off in Arlington for a spot in the college football playoff, an auto bid in the college football playoff. Then you got a plethora of interesting teams at 4-2. You've got Iowa State, the aforementioned Kansas State and Arizona State, and little old West Virginia, Garrett. West Virginia is sitting there still clinging to hope. They're going to be on the graphic this week with still a slim chance at college football playoff, or at least Big 12 championship berth. So the big games to watch. We've got Utah versus at Colorado. Colorado 10-point favorites at home, and Kansas at BYU. So a couple of teams having really disappointing seasons, but big opportunities to play spoiler this week. Let's start in Boulder, Garrett. We've got Brunch with the Buffs because it's a 10 a.m. local kick. I'm going to trademark that. I might buy the domain as soon as we get off of this. That might be a good $10 investment here. But Brunch with the Buffs, it's a 10-point favorites. Utah, they went 11-2 against Colorado in the Pac-12. But Utah's also lost 5 straight games this year. Maybe they found something with Brandon Rose, but for me, this game's not in doubt. The cover is going to depend on how well Colorado can stay focused, and if Utah can come back from that massive letdown at the end of the game last week in a rivalry game.
Well, and it'll depend if their athletic director decides to try to make a bunch of excuses for him again and, be completely unprofessional in his attempts at, defending his team. Very embarrassing, obviously, for Utah at the beginning of this week. Utah fans, if you're watching this, apologies. I'm going to call it like I see it. It was holding, and you can feel bad about it, and you can say not in that situation. But it was, and that's letter of the law. And, that's all that I really have to say about that. And if you think I'm a hater, you clearly haven't watched this podcast before, because I've been one of the biggest Utah homers probably across any of, college football sort of national podcasts. I've just been homering for Utah repeatedly. That being said, I think you're probably right about this game not really being in doubt. The one thing that I'll say that goes Utah's favor here, they do, I think, have something with Brandon Rose. Brandon Rose looked pretty good, at least in the first half of that game. He looked pretty good leading the team down the field, definitely doing a lot of really good things. If he can take another step, look like he did in the first half for the entirety of a game, Utah's defense is good enough to give Colorado's offense some problems. And this could become a pretty close game pretty quick. If not, I still think Colorado wins. I think they're the more complete team. But after what Utah just did to BYU, I understand it's a rivalry. Anything can happen in a rivalry, so you're going to get up for that one. But I think after what they just did, they showed that they can still compete at the top of the conference. They're really close. They're just missing pieces. Obviously, none of them expected that they were going to be without their quarterback the entire year again. But this is where we are, as sort of a Utah fan base, right? That's where they find themselves. Colorado's a better team. Colorado should win this game. I do think that Utah will find a way to cover. I just think they're going to find a way. Could be a massive letdown spot. Could be emotionally drained. They might lose this game by 50, but I think they're going to find a way to cover this one and keep it close.
I'm going to take Colorado. They do have to stay focused. They do have to find a way to lock in, and a weird kickoff time. I don't know why they're doing this themselves. I guess that's Fox just being Fox with putting these games early in the day, 10 a.m. local time, like I said. Yeah, I'm going to take them to cover. Brant Kuithe is out for the year for Utah as well. That's kind of the big offensive weapon that they were leaning on. I just haven't seen enough from Utah other than that first half against BYU. And Colorado can take care of the football and not hand opportunities to Utah. I really don't see Utah creating opportunities for themselves. Yeah. And if Colorado can win this one, I mean, it's two of the most disappointing teams in the Big 12 to close out their schedule with Kansas and Oklahoma State.
Yeah, and I think Colorado's on a crash course to meet BYU and Arlington. I think there's a real chance that that's where we're going. I don't think that there's really a whole lot of debate that's where we get. Really, I think at this point, you're just wondering as a Colorado fan, can we still make the playoff if we end up in sort of maybe a 9-3? Well, not, I guess it'd be a 10-3 situation. You're hoping you could. I don't think that you will.
No, they've got to win out,
So
including the
you're
Big 12
thinking you got to win
championship.
out and win your conference to get in. So it's kind of all or nothing if you're a Colorado fan right now. You might get a little extra hype and a little extra help because people, I think, are wanting to see Colorado get up there. I just don't think that they're there, and that's going to make you start to say, okay, well, like, could we have just not dropped some of those dumb games at the beginning of the season? That Nebraska loss is looking worse and worse as the weeks go on, man. I know a bunch of Colorado fans are begging for a rematch of that game right now.
Let's move on to the other contender in the other top of the table team in the Big 12. BYU 3-point favorites at home against a Kansas team fresh off of knocking off Iowa State and knocking Iowa State out of playoff positioning. Can Kansas play spoiler 2 weeks in a row? Or in BYU, living on a prayer. Our friend Parker Fleming is at Stats of War on X. He tweets out every Monday the "Did we really get beat that bad?" graphic. It's one of my favorite things on college football Twitter. And it seems like every single week, Garrett, BYU is on the negative end of those net efficiency analyses. And yet they're sitting here undefeated with only a couple games to go here in November. Even the Utah fans that I saw in those replies have shifted from they can't keep getting away with this to honestly, it's impressive at this point. They have the team of destiny vibes. They're playing with fire each and every week. Will they go full Miami? That's my question, because it's all going to come down to the run defense for me. Kansas has run for 190 plus yards in 3 straight games. We've seen BYU lapse in the run defense before. Against Oklahoma State and UCF, they allowed over 250 yards on the ground. So if they can stop the run, it's going to be really difficult for Kansas to pull an upset. But if Kansas can establish that ground game like they did last week against Iowa State, could be a really bad day in Provo.
It sure could be. I just don't think that's who this BYU team is. I think BYU is getting a little extra hate, sort of nationally, and people are coming around a little bit slower. I think this BYU team is really, really good. The issues they have defensively typically just come from them playing a little bit more of a zone look and not being able to get to the ball as quick. But at the same time, this is still just a really, really good defense that finds ways to smother you and force you to execute. Even looking last week, like I know the rushing has been a little bit of an issue. Only really gave up 120 yards to Utah, and that was on I think more than 30 carries. Yeah, 32 carries in that one. So it's not like they gave up massive numbers. It looked worse starting off, but they really tightened it down in that second half, gave up no points. But Trey, I want to ask you this. I don't know if you even know this. How many games this year do you think BYU has reached the 30-point threshold? They played 9.
How many games have they reached the 30-point threshold?
Yeah, where they've scored minimum 30 points.
Man, I'm going to go with – I feel like you're setting me up for a low number here. I'm going to go – no, you know what? Because they've played quite a few like really solid offensive performances with plus 30. I'm going to go 6.
It's 7. They've scored 30 plus in 7 of their 9 games. They scored 18 in that absolute grueling fight with SMU. And then, of course, last week, 22 in another rivalry, which was just, absolutely back and forth. Outside of that, they've got 41, 34, 38, 34, 41, 38, and 37. And I don't think people are talking about them like they're this massive explosive offense. They just take care of their business, right? They are 27th in scoring nationally. They're 25th in scoring defense nationally. This is a very good BYU team that I don't think is getting enough credit for what they are doing. I understand, they haven't played the best teams in the world. You can only beat who's on your schedule, by the way. But they've been beating the teams on their schedule. And there have been some close calls. There have been some games that they probably shouldn't have been trailing in, but found a way to win. But winning is a skill, and they seem to have it right now. I think BYU runs the table here. I don't think that they lose to Kansas. I don't think Kansas is complete enough as an offense to threaten this BYU defense. I think they're going to have to, if Kansas is going to win this game, they're going to have to sustain long drives of, 8, 10, 12 plays that result in 7. I don't think Kansas can do that over the course of an entire game. So there might be stretches where Kansas is really hanging in this one, but I do think BYU pulls away and ends up winning this one late.
Man, I think Kansas has the offense to really scare him. I'm going to disagree with you on that one. Offense has not been Kansas's problem. I'm going to take Kansas to cover the spread and put the fear of God into BYU. Kansas has lost 6 games this year. 5 of those 6 games have been by 1 score. I think this is another 1-score game that could go either way, and we're probably going to see BYU on the negative side of that graphic again on Monday, maybe with another win. We'll see. That's elsewhere in the Big 12. We've got Baylor visiting West Virginia. Like I said, West Virginia is still alive. Baylor 2.5-point favorites on the road. Cincinnati at Iowa State. Iowa State 9-point favorites at home, and Houston taking on Arizona. The bowl bid for the Cougars is alive and well against an Arizona team that is really struggling, but the Wildcats, got it right that time, are 1.5-point favorites at home. Any of those 3 games interest you at all, Garrett?
I may not end up watching a lot of any of these games. I'll probably have them in a corner of a quad box at some point. I think Baylor against West Virginia should be a lot of fun. Baylor's playing a lot better football than I think we expected
good ball.
to. Dave Aranda absolutely doing his best to save his job right now. And I think, hopefully finds a way to do so. But, man, I got to tell you what, I think that Houston-Arizona game could be another little emergence moment for Houston. And Houston's been playing a lot better. They've kind of quietly been making some noise. I think they're going to make a little bit more noise, beat Arizona, and pull it off again. I think that'll be a fun little Friday night game for us to kind of watch and see if the Cougs can do it again.
Baylor needs to beat one of West Virginia, Houston, and Kansas to get bowl eligible. Houston is sitting at 4-5, and they have at Arizona, Baylor, like I just mentioned, and at BYU. So need to win 2 of those to find a way to bowl eligibility. It's going to be tough, but I think even a 5-7 season in year 1, fantastic job, absolutely. And very bright.
That's like year 1 of his system. Still needs to get his players in there, needs to recruit. And if you can go 5-7 at Houston, there's going to be some people in that city that pay attention. You're going to get a couple of kids who can play ball out of that city of Houston, and you'll field a better team next year.
Yeah, Willie Fritz, great portal destination potentially as well under him.
Gracious, how about that?